Phenomena is a multi-timbral analog modelled synth engine with vast modulation possibilities and textural manipulation. Before we get stuck into playing some of the presets included with the instrument, let's take a quick look at the user interface to get familiar with the four main module-like sections. At the bottom of the instrument there are 4 tabs, but the one where most of the work is done is the Designer tab. The Designer tab comprises of 2 main columns, Voice 1 and Voice 2, with each voice having a further 3 modules to help mold and create your sound. These are color-coded to help with navigation during editing. In the interest of keeping things simple, we'll begin by concentrating purely on Voice 1's pathway, which is all in blue from sound source to output. So the very first module we find is to allow us to choose our sound source, and straight away we discover the unique and inspiring nature of the instrument, allowing us to choose from a whole host of recorded analog sound sets that already have a slightly textured and complex sound. All the way through to the more simplistic single wave based sound sources. We'll stick to a simple saw wave for now, the raw saw 5 from eBus 01, as it's a good unaffected sound to test out the rest of the parameters. Okay, now as we head down to the next module, we'll find our primary means of sculpting, with all parameters volume based, making this module something of an amp section. From left to right we have volume, pitch, which is semitone and fine tune, and panning. Then our volume based envelope, which is an AHDSR, so the extra hold function in there for added flexibility. Then finally what is effectively 2 LFOs, one modulating volume, creating a tremolo effect, the other modulating pitch to create a vibrato effect. Both LFOs have sine, square, saw, and random waveforms, along with speed and depth knobs. Let's take a quick listen to how the envelope and LFOs affect the sound of our saw wave. Before we leave this section, it's worth mentioning a small button to the right of certain parameters of the instrument. This button opens a dedicated LFO for that parameter. Here is the volume LFO, where we can set our tempo, steps, shape, among other variables. And here is how it sounds. Okay, let's head off to our next module. This section is really all to do with filtering, with the added bonus of portamento, or glide as it's called here. Let's check out a short slur style glide. And now for the extreme dive bomb style glide effect. Up next is our main filter, a ladder filter with low, band and high pass options, all with frequency and resonance dials. Here's how they sound. The The final section on the filter module is an LFO dedicated to the filter's parameters and an AHDSR envelope for the filter. At the very bottom of the Designer tab lives a step sequencer, which has step options all the way up to 128, along with retriggering and an abundance of modulation destinations to choose from. Let's choose the low pass of the filter and give a random sequence a go. Alongside the step sequencer, we find a sub button. This adds a doubling of the note 1 octave below the triggered pitch. And finally, on this tab, we find 4 separate sends out for each voice. This directly relates to the inputs of the 4 send buses on the next tab. As you can see, we have the choice between a series of different effects and can run up to 4 simultaneously. There is also an effects tab where we have 4 more choices of effect that are voice specific. Let's now head back and create a patch from scratch using everything we have talked about thus far. Okay, so we know the synth is very capable of creating the rich and brooding pad textures and strong resonant leads, but I want to discover the softer Fender Rhodes or Hammond organ side of its palette. So we'll try and build that sort of texture now. We are back with our initial patch of just raw saw. So I want to choose for this particular patch the FM piano in voice 1 and the toy piano in voice 2. This already gives quite a delicate and beautiful sound. Okay, we're heading to the envelopes for both voices' volumes, with little to no attack, no hold at all, lots of decay to capture that natural percussive piano decay, no sustain, and for now, no release. If we were going for a Glock or Celesta sound, we would have a high level of release. So the sound change is subtle at this point, but the decay is now more on point for the piano vibe we're going for. Okay, great. Let's head off to our filters, and I want a very hollow and warm texture as a baseline for the instrument's tone. So for now, that sound is a little weak, but once the filter's envelope is in action, that will be a nice level. Very much the same settings as the volume's envelope, with no attack, no hold, a long decay, no sustain, and no release. Okay, we're getting there. I'm going to roll off a little more of the filter. Okay, I'll turn our attention to modulation now. We'll have a trem effect on both voices, with voice 1 being affected by a slow moving trem with middling depth, and voice 2 a fast paced trem, again with middling depth. So we're now arriving at the sound of the Fender Rhodes or Hammond organ. I'm also going to set up an LFO on the pan of voice 2, just a standard left to right, with no retriggering to keep the pan continuous. Okay, they're starting to sound quite interesting now. I'm pretty happy with the overall sound, so just the final effects-based steps now. Voice 2 should already have some phase on it. We'll keep that in there. And on voice 1, we'll add a rotary cab, which will emulate that classic Leslie cab sound that is so synonymous with the sound of the Hammond organ. Great, Okay, so last step will be to place these voices inside a room with a touch of reverb from send 1. Okay, let's see what we've got. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the Arp tab. This is a very innovative arpeggiator engine that allows up to 8 notes to run through their own individually controlled 16-step sequence, all able to be played through at different speeds from a bar down to 16th notes. Here is a simple bass sound, and when I press one note, we have a straightforward pulsing bass. And as we hit another, we get our note 2 sequence to kick in, which is running at a faster pace, creating an almost polyrhythmic effect. The only limitation to this ARP is your imagination, as the triggering possibilities seem endless. Okay, let's end by listening to a couple of presets that will ship with the instrument. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy Phenomena.